Hey guys, so yeah, this is my late night review for chapter 294 of My Hero Academia. And first, first twice, and now supposedly compress. I think he's still holding, I think compress is still holding on right now, but I think by next chapter or a couple I think by next chapter yeah, I think Compress is pretty much a dead man walking. Like he's if the last two panels is anything to go off of, he's pretty banged up, and I don't think he's gonna make it. So, but yeah, damn Horikoshi. First you kill twice, and now Compress. It's and now you might be killing Compress. Like holy shit. Um. But then again, I guess you could say this whole war has basically hasn't been short of casualties to begin with. Um, but with once again, with Compress's current fate in mind, I feel this is another chapter where more than anything, it showed just how strong the bond between the League actually is. I mean, as it's been pointed out by many others aside from myself, the League are by technical definition still criminals, but because of how they've lived together, suffered together, and fought together, it's through this struggle that their bond has become far stronger and much more, and they've become a lot more dependent on each other than honestly any of the heroes and even the students we've come to know. And I'm not trying to discount anything that Class 1A or Class 1B have experienced, but the key difference is that while the students have had their own trials that formed who they are based on those experiences, at the same time, it's also true that for the most part, a lot of the students have lived relatively carefree and happy, relatively carefree, happy, and easygoing lives, and that none of them have ever really felt ever really felt what it's like to be persecuted, and because of that, I don't think I don't think any generation of hero, including the current one, will ever be able to understand the League. Will ever be able to understand the League and just villains in general and how much that they have suffered in order to survive. But that doesn't mean that the current generation and the previous one can't broaden their horizons and look at the world through a different lens than any generation that has come before them. So it's one of those things where I think it's gonna be very hard in order for heroes and villains to ever truly find common ground, but they can to find common ground, so to speak. But I think they can at the very least like pretty much try and understand pretty much try and pretty much understand why this world is the way it is, I think. Um, on that note, though, we also learned the true nature of Compress's heritage as the great great grandson from Oji Harima, the who was known as the peerless thief, and as well as the truth of that legacy. And in a lot of ways, you can basically tie Harima's legacy almost to that of a twisted modern day Robin Hood who protects the persecuted. And what's very interesting in terms of Ojima in comparison to Compress here is that it's shown through Compress that very much like his father, Compress had they're very much like his family and his grandfather. He had initially seen his role up to this point as one to protect the persecuted, which is very and continue the legacy that was started by his that was started by his great grandfather. But over time but over time, and the more he grew accustomed to the League of Villains and whatnot, the more the more his perception of that goal and that ideal had evolved into an ambition far greater. Because even though his dream had more or less relatively remained the same and aligned with his great great grandfather's idea of reformation, in Compress's case, he basically also chose a different path of his grandfather, and chose to entrust his dream to pretty much the future and the people in the League of Villains who he felt could basically achieve in crafting that future a lot better than he ever could, because really all Compress wanted at the end of the day was a future where he could be free from his family's legacy, which in some way or another was basically shackling him. So in Compress's eyes, the League of Villains are the ones who can pretty much free, even if he were to die today, the League of Villains are the ones who can pretty much free him, are the ones who can free him from his grandfather's legacy, and he feels that he pretty much can entrust this goal and this mission to, well, pretty much to them, like that they are the ones who can, the future generations like Toga, like Dabi, to him they are the ones who can continue on that legacy, his legacy for him. With all that said, I believe we are. With all that being said, though, I think this chapter is at least the start of the point that we are now reaching the conclusion of this arc. Because if you really look at this chapter, if you look at this chapter, the League of Villains has more or less escaped, and obviously is more or less escaped, and I don't know how much more, because pretty much the League of Villains is basically on the road to escaping here. I don't know how much more that there really is left to cover, other than in order to wrap things up on the side of the Liberation Army and Redestro. But in either case, this was once again another pointless conflict that left unnecessary casualties on both sides in its wake. And honestly, it's one of those things where, looking at this arc as a whole and what it's achieved, like it's no secret to anyone who's basically looked into Kohei Horikoshi's background, that the man not only took an immense amount of inspiration from superhero comics with this series, but he also took a lot of inspiration from Star Wars as well. And because of that, one thing I found fascinating with this whole arc, honestly, is how it made, honestly, what I think is the best use of George Lucas's ring theory, and how much it showed how it showed a lot of the current generation of future heroes and hero hopefuls are kind of repeating the same mistakes as the previous generation, while at the same time also showing signs of realization that something is wrong with this picture. Like again, in terms of that, we can obviously, the most prominent version of thing of this is we can go back to the whole conflict between pretty much Ochako and Toga. Like that in itself was pretty much Ochiko's I guess you got a bit of an Ida moment where she realized that, yeah, it isn't exactly that things aren't so cut and dry. Like, obviously Toga is technically a villain, but it's like it was only after her fight with Toga that she realized that something isn't wrong with this picture. And so it's one where history is repeating itself, but it's repeating itself in a way where the current generation is learning of that the world isn't exactly as black and white as they've been told or taught. And also Also, on the villain side, I'll be curious what's going to happen. What's going to happen to this whole to pretty much the whole pretty much meta liberation front at this point, because the league more or less did end up has left their meta army allies behind. So I wonder if this whole thing is going to is just going to dissolve, or what's going to happen here in the future, because it looks like it looks like that the league is just escaping is just escaping without trying to go to without trying to help any of their allies. Like, they're just booking it out of there. So yeah, I think this meta liberation front might be dissolved, but I could be wrong. Um, Now, if I were to talk about anything genuinely negative in this chapter, it's probably in the way it was structured. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think a pretty much good a good majority of this chapter was very well structured, but there were also panels where everything was just kind of crammed together. Was just so crammed together that the text was kind of was covering up what was going on in a panel, and it was a little distracting and confusing at times in order to see just what the hell was happening. But again, it wasn't it wasn't a problem. It wasn't a problem for pretty much the entire chapter, but definitely in the bookend of this chapter is where is the worst offender of this. Like, it was in that last chunk of the chapter where it's like, what's going on underneath the text bubble? Like, yeah, just little things like that. It did kind of show a little bit in this chapter. But yeah, guys, with that said, that's all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Mr. Crunchyroll. Death Knight of Anime, signing off. Later, guys.